In this video, I'm going to walk you through a sample weekend trip schedule for New York, specifically Manhattan, that I have up here. And I'm going to go through some of the key points, why we've set certain meetings at various times and locations, and everything like that. Then I'm going to go over a few other points that you want to keep in mind when creating a schedule like this of your own when conducting your own weekend trips wherever you may be going. So first, a couple notes here, a few disclaimers. As I say here, all this information is basically fake. The bank locations are roughly correct based on current information. Of course, a lot of these banks have multiple branches all over the city of New York and Manhattan specifically. So it's not like you meet someone at a bank and every single other person at the bank is going to be at exactly that location. It might be that one person is downtown, one person is midtown. If a bank is large enough, it's going to have a couple different locations. So keep that in mind as well. Generally, the investment banking division of a bank is usually in one spot, but there's always exceptions to that. So keep in mind that you may have to be running around the city even if you're meeting people at the same bank because they just may work in different offices. The email formats here are also not necessarily accurate. I just guessed based on the information here and what I know of the industry. But again, email formats change quite a bit and sometimes these email formats will work, sometimes they won't, but do not go off of what I have here. Just look it up yourself on the website or in your alumni directory or whatever other sources you have. And then final note, in this example, we're going to be assuming that you meet each person at his or her bank, which is why these addresses over here are all bank addresses. Now, you could also meet in a coffee shop, but I found that it's most common to meet someone close to the offices of their bank because that's simply the most convenient, especially if you're meeting them on a weekday like a Thursday or a Friday. Now to go into the actual schedule here. So the first note is that you see that we've batched together a couple meetings in the morning here. So we have 3 meetings in the morning starting from 9:15 through 11:45. The reason that these are batched together, and if you're not familiar with the geography of Manhattan, I apologize for this, but basically Wall Street and Broad Street are located in the downtown area of Manhattan, Broadway as well, actually. And so what this lets the person do is easily get around to all these meetings. It's not going to take that long to go from 60 Wall Street to 14 Wall Street. You could easily do it in 15 minutes. And similarly, getting from Wall Street to Broad Street or to Broadway is not going to take that much time because they're all in a fairly close location in downtown Manhattan. And of course, we know this because before we even reached out to these people to set up these informational interviews, we had already done the research and looked at their email signature, for example, to see which office they're in and based our email request on that. Now you see here that in the morning we have a VP, an MD, an associate, and then another VP. You'll see that just looking at the schedule in general, we do not have many managing director meetings. We just have the one here. That's because it's honestly pretty rare to get an MD who's willing to take 30 minutes out of his day and meet with you in person to grab coffee. It does happen, especially if you know them better or you have some kind of family connection or something like that. But honestly, it's just not that common. You'll find that for most of these trips, you're mostly going to be meeting with analysts, associates, VPs, occasionally managing directors. But I'd say the junior bankers are more common to meet with simply because they're more involved with recruiting. They're closer to you than the MDs are, and so that's what you can expect on your trip. You'll see that we are meeting with MD in the morning. It's pretty hard to get a hold of more senior people on Friday afternoon for the most part because a lot of them go home early or leave for early vacation or they might travel or something else might be going on Friday afternoon. So that's why we've set up this one for the morning. You'll see that we've also set a buffer of around 15, 30, 45 minutes from the end of one meeting, so the 9:45 end time here, to the 10:30 time right here. And the reason we're doing that is basically so that if anything bad happens or in case an interview goes really well and we get a tour of the office or something, we have time to take that into account. I always recommend leaving at least a 15-minute buffer in between meetings. And by the way, that's if the meetings are in a close proximity. So in this case, we see we have one ending at 11 o'clock here and then starting at 11:15 here. And that's fine because these are relatively close to each other. But if it's farther apart, I would say give yourself at least half an hour, as we are right here when we're going from downtown 261 Broadway to Rockefeller Plaza, which is in Midtown in Manhattan. So make sure you give yourself at least 30 minutes. It may even be longer than that depending on the city you're in. So you have to play it by ear, but try to leave a reasonable buffer just in case something comes up or someone cancels or you have to take care of some of your own business. You just never know what's going to happen. So leave some buffer time in between these meetings. And then in the afternoon, we see that these are all batched together as well. That's because these places are all, for the most part, located in Midtown of Manhattan. So it's not going to be too difficult to get around to some of these different places. We see that in total on Friday, we're meeting with 9 people. So we have the 4 in the morning and then about 5 in the afternoon. So this is a good number to shoot for on a weekday. In all likelihood, at least one or a couple of these people will probably cancel or have to back out or their plans will change or something. So when that happens, you want to do a couple of things. First off, if you get early notification of a cancellation and another meeting's going really well, you can casually suggest that you go and meet them at their office or go and get a tour of the office or go and meet other people there. So for example, at your lunch meeting, if it goes really well at B of A, then maybe if the Lazard guy cancels, then you can stay longer there. You can casually suggest meeting some other people if they can introduce you to anyone else. Do something like that, and you'll find that you get a lot of benefit out of that because that's just something you cannot do over the phone or over email. The other thing that you want to do is have what I call the reserve. I'm going to press Control page down to get over to this. So the reserve is basically a list of other people that you know in the city. So New York, for this example, Manhattan. And these are people that maybe you've corresponded with over email or the phone before, and you've brought up the fact that you're going to be in the city for a certain time period, but they're not the highest priority contacts on your networking list. So maybe these are people you don't know as well, but they mentioned they'd be available at certain times. So it's really important to have this because, again, if something happens at the last minute, it's fine to email one of these people or just call them maybe 1 or 2 hours before and say, hey, you know what? I have some free time this afternoon between 3 and 4 p.m. because one of my other meetings got canceled. Would you like to meet up and grab coffee for 15 or 20 minutes quickly right near your office? It's really important to have this. I recommend that you always take this with you because I interviewed a lot of people who have conducted many weekend trips and they all said that it's important to have some kind of list on hand not only of the contact information for the people you're meeting, but also for the people that you could potentially meet if others back out or have to cancel. And on this list, it looks pretty similar to the first one, where you have the name, title, bank name, phone number, email, the physical address. I also recommend that you have the availability here, of course. Now, if a person says that they'll be available whenever, then you can just leave it open-ended. Maybe you can just say Friday slash Saturday, for example, if they said they'll be available all weekend. But if they said something more specific, you can certainly write it down here as well. And maybe if you've made an email request to one of these people and they've said that they'll be free on Friday afternoon, but maybe you've already booked all your slots or something, for example, and you already have at least one meeting every hour, so you're not going to have time to meet up with them. Well, put them on this list anyway. And if someone backs out, go ahead, call or email them the day of, and chances are they'll be able to meet up with you quickly if they have the time. So this is something important that gets overlooked in a lot of cases when you're planning these weekend trips or any kind of extended trip to an area. You always want to have some kind of backup mechanism in place, as we do here. So then moving on to Saturday here, a couple of things to point out. You see that we're starting at 11 in the morning. And this is because it's really, really hard to get people to meet early in the morning on a Saturday. A lot of them will go out the night before, or they just won't want to meet that early. A lot of people tend to show up to the office fairly late on Saturday, sometimes in the afternoon or sometimes in the late morning. So it's generally better to shoot for something like this instead. You see that here we have mostly analysts and associates, one VP on Saturday, and that's because, again, a lot of the senior people will be more difficult to reach on the weekend, on Saturday and Sunday, and you'll find that analysts and associates should still be around. A lot of them may be at the office if they have work to do, so you'll have better luck getting in touch with these people on a Saturday as opposed to the more senior guys. In terms of the actual banks listed here, there isn't a real pattern to it. I've included most of the bulge bracket banks, a couple of the better known boutique and middle market firms as well, but there isn't a real pattern to it. I would say that in general, for scheduling these types of weekend trips, it's better to get in meetings with a lot of different banks as opposed to getting to know, say, 10 people only at one bank. That's probably excessive because usually if you can get a few people on your side, that's all you need to get interviews at a bank. And again, you want to spread your net as wide as possible when it comes to interviews and recruiting. So I recommend trying to meet with people at a lot of different banks as opposed to concentrating your effort on one, two, or a couple of places. Now you'll also see here how I don't have anything scheduled for the night in either case, and that's because, again, it's going to be really, really difficult to get anyone, especially on a Friday or Saturday night. Thursday night, maybe, but personally, I would still not do it. I would keep all your meetings to the morning and afternoon. That's just going to be much easier. Now, in terms of items to bring with you and a couple of other notes here, just a few points to make. Obviously, you need everyone's phone number and email address because, again, last minute cancellations, to properly take advantage of these, you're going to need a mobile device, either an iPhone or a BlackBerry or something that lets you make phone calls and check email on the go. It's absolutely essential for this kind of trip. You do not want to be walking around trying to find internet cafes in Manhattan. They aren't that hard to find, but it's just really inconvenient and you want to be able to check everything remotely. So you definitely need this information. I would say you also want to print out this list. So I would have a hard copy of this list that you've printed out. Just print out everything on here, make sure it all fits on a page and everything. Also print out your reserve list as well, just in case. So you definitely want to have those with you. If you can and you have a small laptop, I would even suggest that maybe you want to take that along. Bring along copies of your resume, of course. So definitely have the mobile device, copies of your resume, these lists on hand. I would say it's also not a bad idea to have a map of Manhattan or whatever city or region you're visiting with you as well. Have a map and maybe mark down the locations of a couple of banks or the different firms you're visiting on there. It's easy to get lost, especially if you're in a big city that you're not familiar with. So you definitely want to have some kind of navigation with you. And if you have it on your iPhone, that's great. If you have it on your other mobile device, that's fine. If you just want to bring a hard copy of a map, then that's also fine. But make sure you have something in case you get lost. I would say the other thing that's important here is your networking tracking list. So every single person you meet with on here should be on your networking tracking list in some format. So you should take all their names, titles, all this information, make sure it's on here. And this is important because this is where you write down any notes about them, anything interesting that they told you during the meeting. You have your next steps and next steps date here, your date of last contact, agenda, what they can possibly help you with. So it's really important to keep track of this information. And so I would also print out this list and have a soft copy with you on your laptop, or you can email it to yourself and just check it on your mobile device. A couple different options, but I would have multiple copies of this with you as well. So those are a couple quick notes on how you actually set up a weekend trip similar to what we have in the schedule for this, and how you get the most out of it, and why you want to take certain information with you. Now, a couple other quick notes on this. If you want to actually get something this extensive set up for presumably what's a 2 or 3 day trip here, maybe you get in Thursday night or really early Friday morning and then leave on Sunday, something like that, I would say you really need to start planning at least maybe 3 weeks in advance. Make a list of all your contacts. To get this many meetings set up, probably have to email around 30 to 40 people because you have this list and then also the reserve list. So keep in mind, it's going to take a while. Try to get in all your emails in that first week, and then people are going to take some time to follow up and confirm. And then in the last week, a few days before you actually get there, is when you want to follow up with everyone and confirm that the meetings are still on. So that's a quick overview of how you get this type of schedule set up, how you get the most out of it, and a couple other items to keep in mind and various information and different items that you want to bring to take full advantage of your trip.